Morning, we're here again, Flow Bee TV. If you've got questions, put them in the comments below. This is kids' questions. If your kids are there with you, get them to ask questions, put them in the comments and we'll get to answering those. Now, this bee box bass guitar, we made a joke about putting bees in here, but everybody wants us to do it. So today, this is something that probably hasn't been done in the world ever. We're going to put bees inside the bass guitar and see if they like it and what it sounds like. So stay tuned for that, but in order to put bees in there, we're going to have to open up the hive, get inside, look at what the bees are doing, and then we can transfer some bees from here to here and we'll see what happens. I'll put a nice little window on the back this time, so we'll be able to look through at what kind of tones the bees like. Alrighty then. So the next thing we need to do is light a smoker. Now, the smoker is an important piece that beekeepers use, and it's important to get just the right kind of smoke. You don't want to be blowing flames into your hive or anything ridiculous like that. You want to have a nice, cool, gentle smoke coming out of here, and you blow it into the entrance of the hive, and the bees, it has a kind of calming effect, which is a good thing. But so what we need to do with this lighter here is light the pine needles inside this smoker. Okay, here we go. Hang on a minute. Something's a bit weird with this one. There seems to be a problem with this smoker. It's going red for some reason. Whoa. Okay, that's unusual. This one must be broken. We must have a problem in our smoker factory, because it's supposed to be nice, cool, white smoke. Let me get another one. Okay. Load it up, give it a puff. Okay, good. Nice, cool smoke. Oh, hang on. This one's gone blue. What's going on? We've got blue and red smoke here today, people. This is very strange. Not sure what's wrong with these smokers, but we're going to have to do something about this. I'm not sure what the bees are going to think of blue smoke or red smoke. Put it in the comments below, which smoke do you think the bees will like best? Blue smoke or red smoke? So I actually think it's probably best not to put smoke like that into the hive. Something's wrong with these smokers. I'm going to try again. And here we go. Third time lucky. We've got nice, normal smoke for the bees. Beautiful. There we go. So now I need to jump up here, put this into the entrance of the hive, give it a few good puffs, and it has a calming effect on the bees, because we're actually going to open up the beehive, get in there, and there's thousands and thousands, even up to 50,000 stinging insects in here. We want to make sure they're nice and calm when we lift the lid off the hive. So I'm going to protect myself by putting on my bee suit and doing it up so the bees can't get in and sting my nose, because they like to sting the nose of bears when they come for the honey. Okay, next I'm going to grab my hive tool, which I have misplaced somewhere. I'll just grab another one from over here, and what we're going to do is lever the boxes apart by putting this tool in between them and just gently lifting up like that till it's nice and loose. Then we're just going to go and take that box off. So some of the bees are in this box here. You can see them in the window. We're going to leave them aside as we look in at what's going on in the brood box. This is where the queen is. This is where she's laying lots of eggs. This is where the babies are. And this is where they're storing pollen and some honey as well that they need to eat in order to feed their babies and survive. So I'm going to blow a little bit of smoke onto my hand just to mask my own smell, because bees have an incredible sense of smell, and they use their antennae at the front here to smell different smells, and one of them is the smell of a mammal. So I'm going to mask that with a little bit of smoke, and then we're going to get in there and pull some frames out. Look at these bees there. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to stare in at this world of what's going on. They're building little bits of honeycomb on top of the frames here and generally going about their business. So if I just lever the frames apart a little bit here, if you've got questions, put them in the comments below. We'll get to answering those. So here we go.
Lucas, age 9, asks, how many bees in one hive?
So there could be up to 50,000 bees in a hive like this, maybe even more sometimes, which is absolutely incredible to have that many bees in a hive. And if half of the bees go out to pollinate and go out to the flowers, and each one visits 2,000 flowers, which they can, or even more, then that's 50 million flowers a hive like this could visit. So here you can see a boy bee with its big black eyes and bigger body, and here you can see a girl worker bee, and that's a young one because it's kind of fluffy and fuzzy. The fuzzy ones are the young bees that have just hatched out or emerged out of their cells. There's another drone. Drones have no stingers, so they're nice ones to pick up. Let's have a look at the other side of this frame.
Cedar Pockman Ding from Hong Kong is asking, how do they know where to store the honey and where to store the babies?
Okay, that is a good question, and the answer is the worker bees actually make a pheromone to let the queen know when a cell is good to lay in. So the worker bees will get down there and they'll put a pheromone as if to say, this. It's like hanging something on the doorknob of the hotel room saying, this one's good to go, and then the queen will then go and lay in those cells. How the bees decide which is what, that is a bit of a mystery. There's some kind of collective consciousness that goes along with bees. I'm just going to put this frame aside and we'll take another one out just by levering it apart. Once again, if you've got questions, any questions, there's no such thing as a silly question. This is a special live for kids today, so if you've got children's questions, put them in the comments below. Doesn't matter how silly they could be.
Luke Harrison's asking, how do you know when you have overpopulation?
So when you have overpopulation, the bees actually start spilling out the front, and there's a big ball of bees at the front of the hive and they can't actually fit in the hive at all.
Charles Johnson is asking, are future flow hive boxes going to have the window in the brood? He would really like this feature to be added.
Okay, well, that's, if anybody else would like that feature, let us know, and then what we like to do is incorporate all the things that people want into the next hive model.
Hugh Mortimer is saying, hello from Sydney, Australia. When native bees want a new queen, how do they know how to kill the old one?
Okay, so native bees, these are actually the European honeybee. They're native to Europe, not to here. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the Australian sugarbag bees, then that's a question I can't answer because I'm no expert in Australian sugarbag bees. So any kids' questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering them. Alright, so we're going to take another frame out here. What we're doing is just having a look through this brood nest. Lucky are we to be able to look in on this world. The bees being nice and gentle. On these
Sean Eason wants to know about harvesting wax from a flow hive.
Okay, so you can take wax and honeycomb from the edge frames. If we have a look at one of the edge frames, you will see that they're mostly honey, and it's not a bad idea to cycle out frames, and you can end up with some wax that way. Otherwise, you could put another special wax collecting container under the lid, pull out the hole in the inner cover and collect some honeycomb up there, or you could pull out the cap in the hole in the inner cover, and the bees will just build lots of comb in that roof cavity if that's what you're wanting.
Sonny, age 6, asks, how do the bees make honeycomb?
So bees are incredible the way they can manufacture honeycomb. I mean, it's quite intricate patterns and amazing engineering, and the honeycomb pattern is the most efficient way to hold a whole lot of heavy honey in a frame. It's the least wall section you could have. If you went for squares, they'd waste a lot of wax compared to making them in hexagons. The way they do that is the worker bees excrete wax from their glands. They eat honey and pollen, and they excrete wax from wax glands. Then it's just a tiny little bit. They get that in their mandibles, the nippers at the front, and they mould it and shape it and stick it on a tiny little cell to increase that cell size. How they manage to continue the amazing hexagon architecture, I do not know. That's something amazing about bees. They can have this whole consciousness. What I've learned is they're programmed to make the best use of the space they have, more so than to make perfect hexagons.
David Thompson's asking, do bees fly at night?
Bees will fly at night, especially if you go there with a light. Let's say you go to a hive at night with a light, the bees come out and fly towards the light, but they don't go foraging at night. They won't go out collecting nectar from the flowers at night time.
Talia, 3 years old, asks, why do bees make honey?
Why do bees make honey? Well, they make it because it's yummy and they can share it with me. I think that's why they make it, isn't it? Got any ideas on why they make it? Put them in the comments below. It's their food. They collect nectar and they store it. And they store lots of honey in their box in case there's a time with no flowers. If you're in a really cold country where there's long, cold winters with snow, they need a whole lot of energy in order to keep their hive hot and so they can survive the long winter. In fact, if you're in a really cold, snowy place, you probably need a whole box full of honey for your bees to survive that winter time. And so it's their food and their energy storage. They also eat pollen, and pollen they ferment into bee bread in the cells.
Angela's daughter would like to know, what made you interested in bees and how did you start? She's 13 years old.
Okay, I got interested in bees as a very young child. I was harvesting honey at my grandfather's place, and I was struck by the amazing honeycomb and just how beautiful it was and how yummy it was. And so then we got hives as well as children and kept keeping bees and harvesting the honeycomb from time to time. And then as I was in my young 20s, I started to run a small commercial apiary selling honey to the local shops. So I guess it's been kind of family tradition, and my brothers keep bees and my sisters keep bees and my uncles and my cousins. So I come from a beekeeping family.
Another 13-year-old on YouTube wants to know, why doesn't the comb go all the way to the bottom of the frame?
That's a great question. And sometimes it does. Let's pull out another one and see. But when you do naturally drawn comb, they will often stop a little ways from the bottom, like this one. So if you put in a wax or plastic foundation sheet like many beekeepers like to do, then the comb will go all the way to the bottom. But for whatever reason, they decide enough is enough and they'll stop right there. Not always, they'll often connect it to the bottom as well. But bees will be bees and they'll always surprise you about what they do inside the hive. This is their brood here, this is their babies, and if we're lucky we might get to see one emerging out of its cell. It's like a cocoon when the grub, or it's a bit like the caterpillar phase. It then spins a silk cocoon around itself, and the bees assist that by capping it over with wax at the end, and that's what you're seeing there, is all of these silk cocoons of baby bees growing their wings and their eyes and turning into furry little fluffy baby bees, ready to emerge out into the hive and start doing jobs. Just like kids do, right?
Tyler, age 7, asks, how do bees find pollen in the flower?
So, collecting pollen is really quite an interesting thing. The bees have amazing ultraviolet vision, and they can see flowers like so much brighter than we can. They can see them from a ways away. And as they get closer to the flower, the bees actually have a static electricity charge. It's like when you rub a balloon, and if you go back a few videos, you'll see me rubbing a balloon on my daughter's head to demonstrate the static electricity build-up. Well, bees do that, and as they approach the flower, the pollen actually jumps off the flower onto them, so half the work is done for them of collecting that pollen. They're then covered in pollen, and the bees actually then scrape it back to what's called pollen baskets. If we have a look around, we might see a bee with pollen in its baskets at the back. On its back legs, it has these balls of brightly coloured pollen that it's been collecting. And then they bring it back and they stick it down the cells. You can see some up here, some different coloured pollens down the cells. If I get the sunlight on that, you might be able to see there. There we go. These different coloured pollens down the cells, and they're fermenting that pollen into bee bread, because when you ferment bread, it's always better for you. Much easier to digest, like a good sourdough. Beautiful. Okay. Now, it's almost time for us to check what's going to happen if we put some bees inside the guitar and play it. Never been done before. It's a bit of a strange thing to do, but let's see what happens.
Jesse, 8 years old, and Toby, 6 years old, are tuning in from YouTube, and they ask, how likely is it that your bees will swarm?
Depends on the genetics is the answer. So swarming is when half the bees push the queen out and off they go and make a new home, and the old hive makes a new queen. That's their natural way they divide. However, bee breeders tend to try and breed that trait out of bees. So if you're getting hives from a bee breeder, they'll often be less swarmy. If you go and catch a swarm, they'll be more swarmy genetics. But if you have a hive and you haven't taken a split, then it could be the case that the bees decide to swarm because they build up in the springtime and lots of bees, and half of them might take off. But it doesn't happen every year, and although in some hives they'll swarm multiple times in a year, so it really does depend. If you don't want them to swarm in the spring, when you can see the numbers really building up, you take a split, take half of the frames out, stick them in another box, and then you'll find that you've got 2 hives, and your bees' tendency to swarm will be then limited because they've got lots of new space to lay the eggs. Okay. Look at that, we've got quite a lot of drones here. Well, let's see what happens if we put this frame inside the bass guitar. Now, perhaps some people might think that's a cruel idea, but then perhaps it's cruel not to play guitar to your bees. I'm not sure. So what we're going to do is just slide them in to the bass guitar like this, and hopefully they will like the music, but I really don't know. Okay, so the bees are now inside the bass guitar. I can actually see on top of the frame here bees feeding each other, passing nectar from one bee to the other. You can see that there. One's got its tongue out and it's regurgitating some nectar to pass it to the other one because, oh, and a third one's joined in. It's a party here. It's a nectar passing party because bees pass it from bee to bee. It's not the bee that collects it that puts it in the honeycomb cell. It's the other bees. Whoop. Okay, let's see what's going to happen now. Well, so far so good. The bees don't seem too concerned about it. What happens if I play a little note? What note should I play? How about a B? I think a B is appropriate. I'll play a B note first, and if they start stinging me, I'll play a B sharp note, and I'll try not to play a B flat because we don't want the bees to go flat. It'll be a very tedious process changing all the batteries in all of those bees. So here we go. Let's see what's going to happen. Okay, can we hear that? I think you better come around to the window, the back of the hive here, and see how the bees are going when we play a few notes on this guitar.
Indy age 4 is asking, can you please play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star?
That's a good question. I don't think I'm going to attempt. I might embarrass myself with that one. But a nice request. So far, so good. The bees seem to like it. What if I play some more sticky music? Because honey's really sticky. I'll play some sticky funk music. Well, they seem to like that too. So sticky music goes well. That's a really good sign. And you'd expect sticky music to go well, really, seeing bees like sticky honey. Well, that was a very interesting experiment of something that's never been done before in the world. The bees seem to be okay inside the bass guitar, so that's really good news, and it's probably important that I play music like this to my bees often in order to keep them happy and healthy. Okay, we're going to put that back into the bee box now because we better take those bees home. There we go. There they are. They're all happy. When I played the sticky music, they started eating honey. Interesting. Okay, we'll put that one back into the hive and see how we go. Beautiful. Any questions, put them in the comments below. That was a very strange thing to do, and I didn't think I would actually do it, but here we are. We put the bees in the bass guitar and played it, and the bees were quite happy about it. You can see quite a few bees still inside the bass guitar down here, where they're crawling around and going, hang on, I'm now in a bass guitar. Where is my beehive? So what I'm going to do is shake them back into the hive by shaking the guitar like this. Okay, there we go. Bees are back in their box and we're away again. We've got time for a couple more questions today, so if you've got a question, today we're answering questions for kids. This is a kids show today, so if your kids have questions, put them in the comments below. We'll get to answering those. And if you know the answer to somebody else's question, then start answering it for them in the comments below.
Misha and Sonny want to know where the queen is.
Where is the queen? Let's see if we can find the queen. Now, there's a lot of bees in a beehive, so it can be hard to find the queen. And on this hive, I don't have an excluder, so she might even have run into the top box. I can't see her on this frame, and I can't see her on this side. I'm looking for a bee that is bigger than the other bees, but has the same small eyes as the worker bees. She usually has a shiny back plate, so just behind the eyes is a shiny area. And I'm also looking out for the way she is walking on the surface of the comb. She struts with purpose, bigger strides, she's got bigger legs, and that's often when you notice her, just by the movement. But she is not necessarily in this box at all, because she could be in the other box. But we'll keep looking all the same. If you've got a couple more questions, we have time for a couple more today.
Amelia, age 9, from Salt Lake City, asks, are you scared when you do this kind of stuff?
No, I'm not scared at all because I've done so much beekeeping. But I guess the first time I started to look into a hive, I was so young I can't even remember. So I'm not sure if I was scared to begin with or not. But you'd certainly get comfortable at looking in beehives. If you wear a bee suit, it helps. With a really gentle hive, some people don't wear bee suits at all. But as you start out, it's always a good idea to wear your bee suit and your gloves and make sure you limit yourself from getting any stings, because they do have quite a sting, bees.
Joe, age 12, asks, can you make a split out of more than one hive?
Can you make a split out of more than one hive? The answer is yes, you could. You could take some frames from this one and some frame to another one, but an interesting thing happens when you combine bees from one hive and another hive together. And what can happen is the bees fight. Not always, but they sometimes will fight, and they'll fight aggressively and bees will die. So if you're going to merge bees from one hive with the bees from another hive, then there's a nice little trick where you put a piece of newspaper in between, make some pinholes in it so there's still airflow, and the bees will slowly get used to each other's smells while they chew that paper away. And they'll chew up all the newspaper and stick it out the front of the hive, and the two hives will be one. So that's how you can make a split from two hives.
Kate, age 6, asks, she has bees right now in a palm at her house. If she gets a flow hive, will the bees naturally move in?
Ah, unlikely. I know what you mean by in a palm. If you've ever seen a palm tree, when they flower, they're beautiful big flowers, the bees go absolutely crazy for it, and it's beautiful honey. And you walk underneath it and there's this big buzzing sound. It sounds like a swarm of bees, but it's just bees getting so excited to get the nectar from the palm. And the answer is probably not. If you put your hive there, will the bees move in? You can make something called a bait hive, and you can even put scents inside like lemongrass oil to help lure a swarm of bees in. But it usually only happens if you're in close proximity to some other hives. And what will happen is a hive will swarm and they'll go, that's a nice home, and they might move into your bait hive. But normally the best way to get bees is to take a split from a friend or go to a bee breeder and buy what's called a nucleus, which is about half of these frames in a little box ready for you to take home and transfer into your flow hive. Thank you very much for all your questions today. If you've got more, put them in the comments and we'll keep answering them. But otherwise, catch us again. We'll be on Facebook Live every week, and I'm there on Wednesday mornings, AEST time, 10 a.m, answering questions. So if you do have more questions,
Chloe, age 10 in Florida,
them.
wants to know how often you should do a brood inspection.
Okay, one more question sneaking in there. How often really depends on where you are in the world and what your interest level is like as well. Some people like to get in there all the time and check things are okay, learn more about bees and so on, which is a wonderful thing to do. Other people like to do more minimum requirements. So here in Australia, you would be inspecting all the frames in your brood box at least a few times a year to check for pests and disease. But in other countries, there's things like the varroa mite, which make the inspections more demanding, and in the summertime you'll be inspecting far more often to make sure those little mites aren't building up in your hive too much. So the best answer for that question is to your local beekeepers. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.